Hello and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you for your company. We are uh, here at the regular Sunday 11 o'clock meditation followed by a Dharma talk. So thank you for joining me and all and everyone here and everyone there. And I'm sure there are many in the between. Some on live watching on 3 platforms, others in the in between sessions, watching them repeatedly, I'm told. So that's good. So this morning, as usual, we will start with the prayers of refuge in the Triple Gem. Um, and so this morning, I would like to do the refuge in Pali. Uh, and so those of you who know the Pali, you can join. If not, you can do the normal refuge prayer. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammang saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. Now the 4 immeasurables. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and a cause of suffering. May they know a powerful happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion of those near and far. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and a cause of suffering. May they know our powerful happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion of those near and far. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from the happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. So now we will do half an hour calm abiding silent meditation, during which I know you all know how to observe the different techniques. So I'll time the 3 slots of time in 10 minutes. And whichever technique you use, it's very important that you are still in the posture and serene in your motivation, sincere in your motivation, not just doing for now and today or me or this life, but for mind and others and sentient beings and future lives. With such altruistic motivation, we sit in good meditation. And then with serene attention, you need to focus your attention to the posture, to the breath, the forward counting, reverse counting, whatever subject you are focusing the meditation on, you should one-pointedly, serenely stay one-pointed, unimpeded by distraction and dullness or doubt or all the impediments. And you have to keep it very simple. Just stay very present in the sitting posture, in the focus object meditation. Calm and very serene and very clear. And your mind will become spacious and very peaceful, tranquilized. So with this, we'll do the meditation in 3 lots of 10 minutes. I'll use the gong to time for you. chanda dharma agela kama vego. So this morning's topic of the talk is significance of Buddhist pilgrimage, and so with the word pilgrimage is cognate with going and touring to places. I think these days we know the word touring to places, and people who do the touring of places are called tourists. So those people who go on pilgrimages are called pilgrims. uh, so the origin and inspiration why Buddhists should go on pilgrimage was a last conversation between the Buddha and Ananda. When Buddha was about to pass away, and then when Ananda, his very cousin and 25 years of attendant, requested not to, pass away, and this is such a dreadful place, this is wrong time and wrong place, and and so he was belatedly requesting him to live long, as expression of his really emotional attachment to the Buddha, not knowing what he's going to do if he passes away, and how I'm going to tell to people what happened, and it almost he felt, it's something was dawning on him so much that he said, "This is a dreadful place for you, pass away," and and so on. He tried to make some excuses, and Buddha consoled him that as I told you in the teachings from the very beginning, all that are born will die, all those who meet will part. However loving they are to each other, they will have to part at the very least convenient time. And all that is acquired and accumulated will be squandered. And so all that are built will be demolished. So this is the nature of all conditioned things, is impermanent. So I told you long that impermanent is nature of all that are conditioned. Hence, my passing cannot be changed, and therefore you should not console, you should not let others become sad and grieving my passing away, but instead you should practice with diligence, for your own death is impending and it too is on its way. And then Ananda said, "Well, yeah, but what I'm going to tell to people, not everybody's going to understand it, how you can pass away." And all of a sudden, and Buddha said, "Don't worry, tell them to go to place where I was born, that is Lumbini, where I attain enlightenment, that's Bodhi Gaya under the Bodhi tree, and go ask them to go to Varanasi, where I taught the way of Dharma, and finally tell them to go away, come to this place, Kushinagar, where I'm about to pass away. And should they go to those places, either as a layman or laywoman or novice, boy or girl, or fully ordained monk or nun, if they go to those places as if you are in front of me, listening and attending me all this year, they will earn the same merit. If they go to those places and recollect it and venerate it, that they will all receive the same blessings and merit if their faith and devotion makes them to go to those places. So therefore Buddha himself encouraged Ananda to tell other people to go to those 4 places, 4 major places and 4 secondary places. So that is the origin. It came from the horse's mouth. The Buddha himself told, and people should go on pilgrimages. And throughout the history, that has happened, and as a result of that, many good pilgrims like say 100 years after Buddha passed away, one of the prominent pilgrim was King Ashoka. King Ashoka was the most powerful king, and then he himself, having had a very not so good background as being a ruthless king, knew that he need to uh, purify and cleanse his negative karma. Then, having met the Buddha's one of the Buddha's successor, called Upagupta, he was encouraged to build so many temples and pillars and stupas enshrining Buddha's relic. That is the most effective way to purify his misdeeds. So King Ashoka, as one of the first pilgrim, had foresaw the importance of doing that, and then he went to all those four places. And this is barely 100 years after Buddha passed away, and the places weren't really that well kept or well managed. And he feared that, if these holy places need great maintenance and care, and there's danger of this place becoming and forgotten and not recognized, let alone people able to find them, even if they wish to go. So he took great effort to build stupas and build big columns bearing inscriptions stating which the places were and how sacred they were. So therefore, King Ashoka, only 100 years after Buddha passed away, being a very powerful monarch of India, and becoming the biggest benefactor of Dharma in his time, and also whose own son Mahinda and his daughter both became great missionary of Buddhism, went to South India and slowly to Sri Lanka, and they became very instrumental in spreading Buddhism in South India. And King himself became instrumental in ordering the building of the stupas and temples and columns all over his subjects, countries. So that range from, those days, the King Ashoka was so powerful. It was not only the Indian subcontinent, but also it stretches to Afghanistan and Central Asia and of course modern day Pakistan and Kashmir and all over India and as far as many other places. So he built many stupas and mostly very long-lasting columns, pillars, and then those pillars had those inscriptions saying that these are the places where Buddha was born, and so on and so forth. So that's today when you go to those places, you actually can see those very Ashoka pillars and columns and buildings. Some may have been demolished later on but renovated afterwards. So the places are all recognizably rebuilt. But throughout history, things have changed, and I don't know how many other notable pilgrims were, but there were very famous Chinese Buddhist pilgrims, because Chinese actually were one of the first foreign countries whose devotees traveled to India and studied Buddhism as early as 2nd century AD. And towards the end of 4th century AD, Chinese monk called Yixing, he was a very prominent pilgrim. He also went to all those places. And now, I'm not saying there were not other pilgrims from different parts of the world, but we're talking about pilgrims who left travelogue, who left the description of the places and the sites and the practitioners and teachings, how active they were and what they weren't during those times. And then, so that's the Yixing. Then towards the then there was other pilgrimage. The most famous one was 7th century Chinese monk was Xuanzang. Xuanzang, when Xuanzang traveled to India both on foot through the Silk Road and also through sea, through Indonesia. He traveled and he wrote very detailed description. The book is called Journey to the West. Very famous on the basis of this book called Journey to the West. That monkey magic. Have you seen the monkey magic? Magic kind of a TV series produced in Japan, and I'm sure you can still watch them. And they're all the story was all based on Xuanzang going in search of Dharma to India, and then brought back many teachings. Then also we have 13th century Tibetan monk called Chak Lodzawa, who also went to India. And during that time, the state of Buddhism was very different from that of the 7th century or 2nd century. So we have very ample records, not very ample records, we have very few very reliable records of pilgrims who went to those places and have written. But we have actually much more detailed description of those pilgrim spots in the Vinaya and Buddhist sutras, where Buddha and his disciples talk about the significance of those places. So anyway, there is no dispute about the pilgrimage sites and what they are. However, due to historical changes, the pilgrimage site has been sometimes neglected and abandoned, and sometimes even deliberately destroyed during war and whatever natural disaster may have. Around the 17th, around between 14th and 18th century, I don't think most of the pilgrimage sites were recognizable. They were all buried under soil and ground, and probably Bodh Gaya remained relatively recognizable, because Burmese kind of pilgrims seems to have always continued going throughout history. The Burmese seem to have always gone to Bodh Gaya throughout all those times, in spite of how terrible things were. And when the Tibetan pilgrim went in 13th century, he did see the Bodh Gaya was completely neglected. It was barricaded by lots of stones and bricks in fear of the invading forces in order to protect the statues and things like that. So you can see that India was in great turmoil during the Bakhtiyar invasion, the Turkish military guy. So India suffered lots of military and war caused distractions of all important monuments, not just Buddhists but also Hindus. And of course, then I'm not going to go over much of the history of those places, because those places are always remain places. You can't change the places and their names. The good thing about the place names has always stayed the same, but things may have changed. The river is still the same, and the distance still the same, because Chinese monk wrote the distance and description of the landscapes and rivers you have to cross to the northeast and towns and so on. How many lees? I think Chinese version of mile is called li. There were, and how long it took, and how many monks there were. All these incredible details are written in the Journey to the West. Anyway, so these are reliable sources of the need to go on pilgrimage, how important pilgrimage was. It is going of those pilgrims to the Holy Land, to India, where they went to study, where they went to pay respect to the pilgrimage sites, and also having met those contemporary teachers and teachings, having studied, like most of the Tibetans when they went in 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century, they all stayed 10, 12 years. Some went back and came back and went back, and that's how Buddhism was transported to Tibet through the pilgrims. The pilgrims actually brought Dharma to their native countries after having been blessed, influenced by meeting the people who are upholding the teachings and paying respect to the holy sites where Buddha said you will receive blessings by going to those places. So the fact that today Dharma is widely spread to different parts of the world because of the undying tradition of going on pilgrimage. So that's one significance is going on pilgrimage enlivens the history, the tradition, the teachings, the people-to-people relationship, and then the teaching become much more spread because people get to know. So if one of us were to go to those places, you realize, oh, I read the names of these places. Now you actually are going to those places, and the names of the disciples of the Buddha and what happened between them all become revealed as you go to those places. So going on pilgrimages, it transforms people. Not only pilgrimage transforms people, but going to places transform people. Did you know that? That places transform people sometimes because people themselves wouldn't change otherwise. They're so stagnant. They're so idle, but once they go and lay their eyes to some places, and when they meet people and some of the events, it completely changes them. They all return home transformed. So going on pilgrimage has... When the Chinese monk first went to India in 7th century, they thought he was a really difficult person. But when he came back, he was treated as a saint because he was a saint. He was amazing bodhisattva. The way he took the great effort to go in search of Dharma and scriptures and what difficulties he faced on the road and the difficult terrain and distance and robbers and wild beasts and not so friendly kind of people and so on. He had all kinds of challenges, but he totally sacrificed all those for the sake of bringing Dharma to China. And indeed he did. He's revered and honored only second to the Buddha in China. And you can see why he is respected. Why? Because going to those places blessed him, changed him. And what he did and what he managed to do to translate the thousands of sutras into Chinese, and which are now main kind of Taisho collection of Chinese Buddhist literature, because of the pilgrims. And same goes with Tibet. When we have Tibetan translator like Lotsawa Rinchen Zangbo, Romi Lotsawa, Ngoklon Den Sherab, and all of those people who went to India, studied many years, returned to Tibet as great saints and masters, and then transmitted the teaching to their native people. So that's why going to pilgrimages transforms people and brings the teachings. So that's the source of the why we have to go pilgrimage. Buddha himself encouraged. Going to the pilgrimage transforms people and brings and enlivens teachings. And now, then the actual places themselves and how to go about in doing the pilgrimage is the person must go not as a mere tourist with the camera, go to quickly, take some photos, quickly come back home, and not act like a pilgrim, Pilgrims have to go with a certain code of conduct. As a disciple, they should go as a traveling retreat. They should go as a traveling retreat. They should think the pilgrimage as a retreat on foot. But these days, the retreat has become much more comfortable. You don't have to go on foot. You can fly. You can go in planes and comfortable coaches and so on. But nevertheless, when you are on the ground, you have to walk on the premises. So these days, in those days, it took 8-9 months just to reach. And then from place to place, it took even more than a year. Some went to India, didn't come back until 8 years later or 12 years later, because some got very sick, and and some not only got sick, but they died. They never made it to India. They just died on the road. India was a very difficult place. If you don't go in the right time of the year, it is very difficult. It was difficult those days. It's difficult today as well. So that's why time to go to India on pilgrimage is only a couple of 3 months a year. So October, November, December, maybe January is still okay, are the 3 months that is tolerably good, because otherwise India, most places, very, very humid and hot in the 40 degrees. And whereas in October, November, December, the climate and temperature is mild. It's really mid 20s. It hardly gets very cold except in the night and the evenings, mornings, depending certain part of India. So you got to choose the time so that you don't die in India. Many pilgrims, they were pilgrims when they went, but they died as pilgrims. They never returned as pilgrims. So, and of course, Tibetan and Buddhist would think it's auspicious to die on a pilgrimage spot, rather than bringing these old carcass back home. So people think that he got really purified. He died on a pilgrimage, but others might think it's an insurance hazard. So people have travel insurance these days. Anyway, so the time to go to India and part of Nepal, because Lumbini is in Nepal and all the other places are in India, you can, if you really go to those 4 holy spots and some of the other minor ones, they can do in 8 days. You can do in 8 days. But I think that's a very, very rushed pilgrimage. In Tibetan Buddhist teaching, they say when you go on pilgrimage, you should at least stay 1 night in that holy place and give some time to sit down and do prayers and do practice and visit the holy sites and get to know about these places, what happened there, what part of life Buddha was spent there, what did he do. All of those will be taught and explained to you by the bona fide guides that you actually see them each sites. Every time I go, we find different guides, and they all have a slightly different version. You can tell some of them are just recently recruited ones, others are really well-read ones, so you can see all kinds of things. I always get, even though I know a fair bit about it myself, but always employ a local one, and it's quite interesting to see where they explain, and they actually get really excited. All these Westerners turned Buddhist or have some interest in Buddhism come to the places when they practice the English and explain these holy sites and their history. They really fire up. Usually they do this in their Bengali language or Bihari language, or most of the time all the pilgrims or tourists are Indians. It's only throughout in December or November, December, there are some Western foreigners come, because foreigners know choose the time of the year, except some naive ones who go in the middle of July, and then they really. So the most people don't know when to go. So you get to hear incredible stories. Some of the guides are really, really well read. Oh, you almost can feel, oh, this guy must have been from that time, reborn again. And they can tell the story as if they were there, type of thing. So it's very nice to, so the time probably, so going to those places, even if you fly, these days you can fly quite a few places. Unlike in the old days, you can't fly. There's no airport, no airlines. There's only some trains and then buses and crowded, and you just have to fight your way to get a seat. You can't just rely on the ticket you have. So it's a really nightmare, and we're not going to do that. I don't do that anymore. So nowadays we do with organize properly, so that way we have our own coach or or whatever. So you can travel on a very, very basic kind of a budget level tour, budget level pilgrimage, or kind of mid over budget, but maybe a little bit under the the safe. I would say safe. I wouldn't call a 5 star. And then you can also travel the 5 star one, because that's a safe one. Is you don't have to travel, fight your way. You always have a seat. You don't have to push people, and so on. You always get your room or seat or hotel or bathroom for yourself without having to really struggle, because people don't cope very well. Particularly Westerners don't cope very well when you don't have those basic things. We think it's basic, but there in India it is luxury. Now the middle class Indians are coming up, so they don't regard them as luxury. They think it's basic necessity. Anyway, so the staying one night at least to those places. Some places we spent at least 2 nights, some 3, 4 nights. Like Bodh Gaya, we spent at least 3, 4 nights. So anyway, so those places, when you go, the sequence of the pilgrimage is really up to you from where you're coming from. I always mostly start from Nepal, and therefore we got to go to Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha. The birthplace of Buddha is right at the southern tip of Nepalese border to India. So you do, whether you spend a few days in Kathmandu or not, because Kathmandu's Buddhist shrines and stupas are not directly related to the life of the present Buddha, however gorgeous and beautiful and live those places are, but they are not related with life of the Buddha. But some people in Kathmandu think that the Buddha had actually traveled to Kathmandu, but I don't think we don't want to argue with them. We don't want to upset them. But there is no record to prove that. But the people like the Shakyas and Litsavi kingdom all are related to Nepal. So you can see Nepal had a very strong Buddhist seat. Anyway, we start in Lumbini. Lumbini is where Buddha actually was born, but mainly his birthplace is significant because his parental home, which is Kapilavastu, is 12 miles west of there. And so if time permits, you go to Lumbini as well as Kapilavastu. Kapilavastu is where Buddha's parental palace, his father's palace is. And he somehow was born in Lumbini almost unexpectedly, while his mother went on a journey to visit her grandmother's home to give birth to the child. But on the story is that he was born unexpectedly on the middle of the journey while they were having a rest in the garden of Lumbini. So Lumbini is significant because that's where the Buddha was born. So today, the birthplace of Buddha is very, very significantly recognizable by this prominent Ashoka pillar. Again, you see this Ashoka. There wasn't anything like 40 years ago, maybe even before that, when I first went there. There wasn't anything but a small shrine, and the shrine was just have some very stone images of the Buddha and his mother and the Brahma, who's all the statues are defaced, and you can hardly tell what that statue is. But just a couple of meters outside the shrine, there is this amazing Ashoka pillar, at least like 15-meter high above the ground. They said that much is also under the ground, which is like a sandstone pillar, which is you can't even do this and cover your maybe at least like I don't know how thick it is. Anyway, so it bears the Ashokan script inscribed saying, "This is the place where the Buddha was born. The King Ashoka, on the 20th anniversary of his enthronement, visited this place and waved the tax for his subject, asking them to look after the place, and he actually waived the tax to the local people. So that shows that during the time of Ashoka, Lumbini was not regarded as anything but not a part of the subject. It was under the reign of Ashoka. So that time, I don't know whether there was a concept called India or Nepal, but definitely it was under his own reign, sovereignty. So these days, of course, people argue Lumbini is in Nepal and not India, and that's true. But in the old story, during the Ashoka period, there is no indication that Lumbini was under a country named Nepal. Maybe it was not even known by then. Because it's good to know the history. Things change, the boundaries change, and the names of the places change, new countries are formed. In those old days, Nepal only were referred to, the Kathmandu Valley was referred to as Nepal. It's only in the 1930s, that Nepal was reunited as a large country. Otherwise, there were 75 districts, and all the districts were different principalities. So definitely during Ashoka's time, Ashoka times is like a 200 BC, 200 BC. So that time, definitely there was no country named Nepal, at least not that exercised control over Lumbini. Because King Ashoka waived the text of the people, asking them to look after the temple and the holy sites, and then he waived the text. So because he can't waive text of a foreign country, so that shows historically during then it was Lumbini. But nowadays, when you go on pilgrimage, you have to cross the border from Lumbini overland to go to Kushinagar. So second place you go to is Kushinagar. But as I mentioned before, if time permits, you go also to Kapilavastu, which is another hour drive from Lumbini to Kapilavastu, and then come back. Even though distance is short, but you wouldn't dreadful the traffic would take you half a day. So that if your time's limited, you can't go there. You just pretend that you went there because they're so close but so far. Anyway, so you go then to Kushinagar. Kushinagar is not very far. But if you were to go on pilgrimage in the sequence of the events of the life of Buddha, you wouldn't go to Kushinagar after Lumbini. You will probably go from Lumbini, you will go to Bodh Gaya and the vicinity where Buddha went, became a monastic, where he cut his hair and then did his many meditation. But of course, geographically and to save time, Kushinagar is on the way, so you should visit Kushinagar. Kushinagar is where Buddha passed away, and that is not a place where Buddha spent long time. Some of the holy sites is place only those major events like birth and passing away occur. Like Lumbini, Buddha was born. Kushinagar, Buddha passed away. This first and last important part of Buddha's life is two places that Buddha spent barely shortest. I don't know subsequently whether the Buddha visited Lumbini or not. There probably were a few visits he came, but definitely Buddha could not revisit Kapilavastu because he passed away there. So Kapilavastu was in not that significant in the sense Buddha spent many years, but it's nevertheless very significant. It is the place where Buddha's holy relics were divided into 8 portions, and all the warring parties came to claim who is there, how they must have the custody of Buddha's relic. But Buddha has made out, he passed away in Kushinagar in order to resolve that would-be dispute, because local kingdoms of the Mallas were not really followers of Buddha's because Buddha had never been there before. But after his passing away there, the locals then revered him, and they also took one share of the relics, and then rest of the 7 portions of relics were given to 7 kingdoms. on each of those places, and then a stupa was built. So Kushinagar, when you visit, you will see the place where he passed away and where his holy body was cremated. And so today, there are lots of other Buddhist temples and monasteries in Lumbini. There's nearly about 30, and Kushinagar maybe at 20. So there's lots of monasteries representing different Buddhists from different parts of the world. Like most of them are Southeast Asian, and there are also Tibetan ones and Chinese and so on. So the places are all little Buddhist kind of communities, even today. Even though all the locals around Lumbini and around Kushinagar, they're all Hindus and Muslims. There are not a single people who are Buddhist family. Only in recent last 2-3 decades, there are some local Indians and Nepalese are converting into Buddhism, so there may be a little bit of increase, but otherwise locals are all Hindus and Muslims, and those people who are minding the holy sites are all public servants of Archaeological Department of India. They are not practicing Buddhists, let alone monastics looking after the place. So you always see them carrying guns and sticks, and so they are all those places are very much managed by security guards, because all these holy Buddhist sites has been declared as internationally very important by UNESCO, and as a result of this, there is a special way how the place should be maintained. And never mind which government comes, those places can never be allowed to be destroyed or defaced, as case might have been in the past, because those places and the monuments are regarded national treasure, if whole treasure of humanity. Recently, when I went to Borobudur in Indonesia, it was indicated that that whole place, even though it's the middle of the Indonesia, which is a Muslim country, are still kept very well renovated and excavated and looked after under United Nations UNESCO's charter and guidelines. So all the Buddhist sites in India are now under similar arrangements. But you can see in the vicinity of the holy site, like Kushinagar and Lumbini, there are lots of Buddhist temples, like the Burmese and Sinhalese, Thai, and Tibetan and Chinese, and all of them have small temples. Most of them also got little guest houses, but guest houses are very basic. Locals and most Sri Lankans would go and stay in Sri Lankan temple and so on. So there's a lot of that kind of activity. But Kushinagar has become very, very important because it's northernmost important holy sites in Indian territory. And only 2 years ago, Indian government took great effort to build an international airport in Kushinagar. The airport was finished, but I don't think it's still open yet for traveling. So we couldn't fly there because there are no airplanes still flying. The airport is ready, but the rest of the infrastructure is ready, but somehow that it hasn't quite very competitive between the cities where they're allowed to fly and where from and all this. Like we have in here, Australia, this Qantas just try to control who flies and where to and where not. So India is no different. Anyway, so it's got a very big international airport built. And then only a few years ago, the Tibetan Buddhist organization called FPMT has finally relocated building of the big Maitreya Buddha project that they have been championing and raising funds for nearly 40 years, as far as I remember, for this project. And I remember even His Eminence Chogi Teaching Rinpoche was invited to go to Taiwan and give Kala Chakra empowerment, and I went to translate for him. The whole project was not really Kala Chakra. Kala Chakra was the thing, but the main idea was to raise funds for that project. It was quite distracting when I was doing the translation. While the teaching empowerment happening, they keep showing all the big screen. All this project was going on the big screen, and people were asked to watch that, as not listening to the actual empowerment. So Anyway, that project had very many ups and downs. They initially were going to plan was to build in Bodh Gaya, but that was rejected. They were knocked back by Indian authorities, and it never worked. Even though they bought a very huge land in Bodh Gaya, but somehow they had a big stiff resistance from the Indian authorities because the sheer size of the Buddha image, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so thankfully it was relocated, and whereas the people in Kushinagar has happily embraced the building of the Maitreya Buddha image in Kushinagar. So I don't know how far they have gone through, because this such kind of big project takes a long time. But at least they have been relocated, and locals, government authority have given the permission to go ahead. So these are some very big Buddhist activities happening in those holy sites when you go. So I'm sure we will be able to explore that this time. In the past, when we went, there weren't any such news. That was only 5 years ago. So things develop very quickly. And so therefore, after that, after Kushinagar, you go to Varanasi. Varanasi is the place where Buddha gave the first sermon to the 5 mendicants on the teaching on the 4 noble truths, in the place called at a place called Deer Park. When you go to Deer Park, there still are the deers, and the same place where Buddha gave the teaching. There's a stupa there. There's a huge Ashoka pillar, and you can see the ruins of the Saranath area is so huge, and you can see how big a Buddhist community it was. And that's a place where the Buddha first went and met his 5 companions and gave them the teachings on the 4 noble truths. And Saranath or Varanasi is situated next to River Ganges, and Varanasi is one of the oldest Indian cities. You wouldn't believe how Hinduistically important that city is. It has a Hindu university, it has a Sanskrit university, it has like 4 or 5 universities. The oldest one is Hindu and Sanskrit. And it also has a Buddhist university, Tibetan Buddhist university. So some of those holy sites got lots of activities. They are really got historical sites. And you can't avoid going to the River Ganges and the burning ghats, where thousands and thousands of people are cremated on the banks of the river every day. So that's one of those things that un-Buddhist things, but very Buddhist, because Buddhists are meant to meditate and watch their dead body. And there you can see that. You can see the dead body being brought one after another, being cremated, right before your naked eyes. One after another. There's just 10 or 20 of them simultaneously burning, all a couple of meters away. And all the relatives and friends and those people who do the work are all there. So it's like a barbecue. You can see this. You can actually smell the fat and everything. Incredible that the locals just all do it they think that all the negative karma of the deceased parents, if you manage to cremate on River Ganges, will be purified. So that's the belief. But of course, Buddhists don't go to River Ganges for that reason. But they go up the road to the Deer Park, where Buddha gave the teaching. So Indian Archaeological Department has kept that place very immaculately beautiful. And one prominent Sri Lankan Buddhist pilgrim, only in the last century, did a lot of work to establish Mahabodhi Society of India. India didn't have Buddhist society, no Buddhist society in India at all. In 18th century, one lone Sri Lankan layman came from Sri Lanka, and he just felt that something needs to be done. He started the Mahabodhi Society of India, and then he initiated building of that temple next to the Deer Park, and so there is a huge statue of him nowadays to commemorate his contribution to the thing. But Varanasi is a very rich city, lots of silk factories, lots of Indians want you to bring to the factories. They know we went to come to the Buddhist sites. All the hotels and Bodh Gaya, those places, all named after Buddha. Huge Buddha statues in the reception hall. So you wouldn't believe it. You're in the middle of a Hindu city, but the Hindus think Buddha is a good Hindu. So the Hindus don't think the Buddha is different from Hindu. They think he's a good Hindu. So it's interesting. Yeah, of course, Buddha could not be different. He's always good. So among the Hindu, he's a good Hindu. But in India, it has many religious figureheads heads during the time of Buddha, like the other religious tradition of Jains and Mahaviras, and who are all contemporary to Buddha, who were highly regarded in terms of various spiritual skills and abilities and magic they can perform. India has so many spiritual gurus from the old days, even today. So Varanasi is an incredible sight. Just walk through the streets, then you will see real India, where most of the yogis and mendicants live on the street. They don't have homes or villas or big temples or monasteries. They all live on the streets. That's their vow of poverty and chastity and simplicity. These Indian monks or hermits really live the hard way, ascetic way. So in comparison that, our Buddhists are middle way practitioners. You can see how the Buddhists become middle way. They can't be bothered doing the hard way. So they all have rooms, and they're all in hotel rooms too. You wouldn't see a single Indian sadhu staying even one night in a hotel. That's against their vow. They must sleep on the street. They just squat on a veranda of somebody if it's raining. So you will see them, hundreds of them in many places in India, and they are on their own pilgrimage. Millions come to see Ganges, not to see Sarnath. Sarnath is come to visit those people who know about Buddha. Those young, newly married couples come to Sarnath because it's a beautiful park in which they can just take photos and do these things. So quite interesting. All the Buddhist beautiful parks are filled with all the young couples. They are not really pilgrims, they're young couples who want to take the nice photos with the Buddhist scenery in their back. Of course, you can see genuine Buddhist pilgrims from Sri Lanka or Buddhist countries. You can see their conduct is totally different. They take shoes off. A lot of pilgrims from Sri Lanka and Burma, they all are wearing completely white clothes, and they must be observing some vows throughout the pilgrimage, maybe the 8 precepts, and so their conduct is very different from the Indians who are tourists but not Buddhist. So you can see most of them are tourists, only few are pilgrims. And then of course you can see a number of other Japanese and traditional Buddhists, and Japanese really they spend hardly more than 1 hour at a holy place. They come quickly, take photos, thousands of photos, they disappear. You can hardly see them sitting down praying because they're always busy taking photos and disappear. And the Sri Lankans, the Burmese, the Thai, at least they do some chantings before the holy sites. You can see the Tibetan pilgrims are different. They are doing prostrations and burning candles, and then the local Indians chase them away, saying you're not allowed to light the candles here. The Tibetans try to bribe them, give money to let them burn the candles. So it's incredible mixture of behaviors happening, because the local caretakers have got very basic wages, and they have orders not to let anybody burn candles. But if pilgrims give them money, they let them burn some candles, and for a few until the people are there, when they disappear, they'll extinguish them, and so it's quite an interesting sight. And then you can see all these beggars. Some are professional beggars, I think, bodhisattvas, to test you how generous you are. I think some of them are really bodhisattvas disguising as professional beggars. Some are really beggars. So you couldn't believe in India, the begging is such a common thing they do, and it really puts you on the spot. What are you going to do with them? It's not just one or two, hundreds of them, one after another. So there's lots of interesting experience of the because Tibetans and Thai and Burmese, they have been told by their teachers that they should give money to the beggar. So they have come prepared. They have brought bags of change. So they will give like small coins, everyone. One by one they give coins. They just that's whole journey. They're giving coins to everybody. Somebody will buy a big box of biscuit, they give biscuit to everybody. So you will see that. You can see they've been encouraged by the beggars, encouraged the and the givers have been encouraged the begging. And the whole family, 6 or 7, 5 children, 2 parents, they all line up and say their whole day. And I think end of the day they do quite well, better than trying to grow some potatoes. So you will have incredible experience. So that's most places. Anyway, so Varanasi. After Varanasi, we can go either way. But if you go to Shravasti, now Shravasti is not one of the main 4 spots of holy site, but one of the 4 minor holy sites. That's where the Buddha spent 25 rainy season retreat. So actually Shravasti is probably most blessed place, because Buddha spent 25 years, and that was a purposely built Buddhist community before Buddha came. So Anathapindika, the famous Buddhist benefactor, bought a whole park and turned it into Buddhist enclave. And so Buddha liked the place so much, he ended up staying 25 rainy season retreat. Can you believe it? And that's such a holy spot. It is where Buddha tamed Angulimala. It is where Buddha gave most of the sermons, because if Buddha gave for 45 years of teaching, 25 of them were in Shravasti. So basically Shravasti is very, very famous, very, very well famous in the literature, but nevertheless it has been somewhat neglected, but not by the pilgrims. Pilgrims have always gone there. So Shravasti is a little bit further northwest of India, not northwest of India, but northwest of Uttar Pradesh, and so nearer to Lucknow, the capital of Uttar Pradesh. Nowadays you can fly to Lucknow and then take a bus from there to there. But then Lucknow is a bit out of the way, so it depends how you go. Anyway, that place has got huge ruins of the Jeta Grove. Jeta Grove. It's a grove of Jeta, Prince Jeta's grove, where many of the prominent teachings and sutras were given there. And that is also a place where Ananda's monuments and Shariputra's monuments, they're all to be found, not just where the Buddha tamed the Angulimala. And from Shravasti, then, of course, you then go to Bodh Gaya. Now, the Bodh Gaya is the place where the Buddha got enlightened. That has the most beautiful stupa. The tallest stupa in India, Buddhist stupa, is in Bodh Gaya, or Mahabodhi stupa. Mahabodhi stupa went through many phases of restoration, you can tell, because if you see some of the old photos, it was half of it. But since then it has been restored, and now last 50 years, 60 years, the sheer number of Tibetan Buddhists who live there and do the work, and many generous Buddhists who donated the funds. A Bodh Gaya Temple Management Committee was set up, and the committee consists of a couple of Hindus, one Buddhist monk, those rest are all politicians. So it's quite funny that whole place is managerially, administered by Hindus and politicians, but one or two Buddhist monks. So it's very, very strange committee there. And the Buddhists couldn't change it because Buddhists themselves are not hardly there. They're only there for the 3 months a year. And the rest of the time, the place returns to what it used to be always, And just adjacent to that, there's a Hindu temple. Next down there's a mosque. So the mosque and the Hindu temple are almost competing. But most people come to Bodh Gaya not because of Hindu or Jain or Muslim. They come because of the Buddha. Anyhow, the Temple Management Committee is a politically very complicated group. And nevertheless, they have the say. They control the whole place. And archaeological department has not much say. The archaeological department has a small museum, but the main site itself controlled by Bodh Gaya Temple Management Committee. Nowadays, there are a few good Theravada monks who have become a little bit prominent in the committee, and also the local Hindus are starting to give due respect. So the still makeup of the proportion of the people who are on the committee is mainly Hindus and politicians, but there are some positive changes in the makeup of that. Not necessarily existing Hindu or politicians are a bad thing, because I think existence of politicians are important because the politicians have the ability to talk to the central government and to protect the place, to guard and to get finance to protect and so on. So maybe there is something to do with that. Thankfully, the present chief minister of Bihar is himself become a really great sympathizer of Buddhism, particularly disciple of His Holiness Dalai Lama. So the last few, maybe 10 years, things have changed a very, very positive direction. There was a time when one moment that His Holiness almost didn't want to go there anymore because of the politics of the Temple Management Committee, whether he can teach under the tree or Bodhi tree or not, and so on and so forth. So they have to completely create a new teaching venue when the Dalai Lama teaches, because temple management people could not cope and organize and support 100% because of their standing, their perspective. So when His Holiness Dalai Lama teaches in Bodh Gaya, there's a whole new venue now set up. Even though it's just an empty land, they have put a small platform and then they put marquee and so forth. But Bodh Gaya has become the real Buddhist Mecca, because all the Tibetan Buddhists and Sri Lankans and Thai too have annual sutra chanting occasions, prayer ceremonies of maybe just like 2-3 months, from November, December, January. These 3 months it's a chock-a-block. You hardly get any room to stay unless you book very early, because they have so many Dharma activities from various organizations and traditions, and the temple management committee makes huge number of money. So now they are all positively geared towards following the Buddhist way, because it is so much used by Buddhist groups, and they get huge millions and millions of dollars in income from the offerings that people bring to the temple. Anyway, so when people go to Bodh Gaya, you will see the place where Buddha sat and attained enlightenment, and then a couple of miles towards the east, you will see that the river on the bank of which Buddha spent 6 years in meditation. And then there are places where Buddha cut his hair, and place where the Brahmin girl Sujata offered him the milk pudding. Um, all of those places are nearby, so there's quite a few spots to visit around that. And then a day trip outside Bodh Gaya is trip to Vulture's Peak or Rajgriha. That's one of the, again, least secondary holy sites. There where Buddha taught the Heart Sutra. And then that is the bamboo grove where Buddha first met King Ajatasattu in Bimbisara. So these are some holy, incredibly historically important sites, and it turned into a Buddhist park. It still is a Buddhist park, the bamboo grove, where it has become a very nice reservoir with a very nice tank, and around the reservoir there's lots of small temples, small monuments built by various Buddhist communities. That's in the middle of the Rajgriha itself. Then you take a cable car outside Rajgriha and go to the top of the mountain of near Vulture's Peak, there where there's a big world peace stupa built by a Zen Buddhist monk who had enough of the war. He couldn't believe what the atom bomb did to Japan, and he made a huge campaign to promote world peace. And he's been building world peace pagoda around the world, maybe 36 of them. One of them is in Rajgriha. You can take this flimsy but relatively safe cable car if your legs are not so strong to walk up the road. It only takes about half an hour to walk. It's not very steep or anything like that. But nevertheless, it's a really nice experience taking the cable car and go to this beautiful Japanese Zen temple on the top of the hill. And then you can walk down from there to go to the Vulture's Peak where Buddha taught the Heart Sutra. So that's a very, very nice outing, again, as I said, you meet all these incredibly the romantic Indian couples and on one side visiting, and then there's all these hundreds of beggars lining up on the road on another. So it's quite a contrast. And these beggars don't beg the romantic couples. The romantic couples got no intention of giving any money. So all the Buddhist sites are completely filled by two contrasting type of Indians. One is these young couples. Another is a very wealthy Indians coming as really tourists. And then there's all this main thing is all the beggars, particularly in Bodh Gaya and Rajgir, incredible number of beggars. And they know exactly, they follow, they run after you, not just for few meters, maybe 10, 15 minutes, they keep following you. And you feel so sad, and most tourists, of course, always want to give something, but they didn't come prepared, And if they come prepared, maybe they change $100 into changes, and they give, within half an hour it's gone, and then when you're going to change another $100, I don't think so. Most pilgrims are not like that, because most Buddhists have not only brought their money to change, give, but they have money brought from the family and friends. They say, please give this on my behalf, do this on my behalf. So they brought so much money to make offerings, and giving to the poor is a good offering, really. Of course, giving to the Buddha and the flowers and monks, and that's also good. But in India, the offering really is needed, because the beggars are really, really aggressive. And looking in their eyes, you can't walk away without giving something. So you got to adopt one principle: whether you give something or you just smile at them and say, do namaste and just go. Politely go, and then they know. A lot of the time they don't chase Westerners because they don't know the Westerners haven't come prepared. But they'll chase after Tibetans. They'll chase after Tibet. They chase after Thais, Burmese, because all the devout Buddhists have basically come to do just that, So it's quite an interesting scene. Anyway, so then from Rajgiri you go to Nalanda. Nalanda is just a little bit less than an hour drive towards Patna, and there you will visit the big Buddhist remnants or ruins of Buddhist university, Nalanda, and that is the seat of all the great Buddhist scholars, at least of the Mahayana tradition, who studied and taught and wrote and debated, and they have remained very big Buddhist institutions. So you go to Nalanda, where there's a big stupa in memory of Shariputra, which is said to have consecrated by Buddha himself, because Shariputra predeceased the Buddha. So in this way, most of the places. Then there is another place called Vaishali. That's another 2-hour drive from there. If you succeed, have the time permit to do that, you can go to there. And Vaishali is where Buddha ordained women. So historically, that's quite significant. And that's also where the monkeys offered honey to the Buddha. So each of the places got something happened between Buddha and someone. Like there is a spot in Rajgiri where Buddha was injured because his cousin rolled a big rock, a boulder, to kill him. And it actually hit Buddha's right foot, injured the big toe or something. So there is a spot where that happened. So there are some significant places where such things are marked archaeologically if you get to see them. So there are lots of interesting sites like that. So when a Buddhist person goes on pilgrimage, in spite of whether you want to give money to the beggars or not, one should always go to those places and sit at least down and do the short 7-limb prayer or 16-hour puja or whatever little practice prayer you have, or sit quietly under the tree or place to do your meditation in commemorating those holy activities that occurred in those places. So going on the pilgrimage is very, very meaningful. And then if you get to go to places like Ajanta and Ellora, those famous Buddhist cave temples, these were all built like 200 years after Buddha passed away, all the way to 7th century. So incredible mountains were carved out of mountains. This is not a single nail or a single pebble size building material was brought in, but everything was dug out. Whole mountain was carved gently, first as a big room, then the statues out of them, pillars, beams, seats. Incredible. You can see the sheer amount of the carving that created these big assembly halls, huge Buddhas, big kind of a Shariputra and Moggallana, and then all the Bodhisattvas, then all the amazing gardens, all of them are carved out of the rocks. And then incredible murals that's over 2,000 years old, still intact in the ceilings. Because there's nothing there, they didn't put electricity, they didn't put water there, it's left as it is. So still, it's, the only natural lighting will let you be able to see. You can take torches, but otherwise they can't. But the caves are so big, you can fit like 200-300 people, and it's just one of the many holes. There's like 27 such big cave temples, one after another. Each of them were carved and made, sponsored by different Indian kings in honoring their mother or wife or husband or whatever. In their name, they did so to build the stupas and build those temples. So those cave temples are incredible creation of devotion by people. They didn't need to bring any building material. Good thing about those Indian cave temples is you don't have to fear the price of the building material going up because there's no building material. There's only sheer love of labor. That's just chisel and few utensils, few kind of instruments to carve the rocks, and that's it. Because everything was carved out and thrown down the kind of cliff, and the whole temple and all the monuments, the statues, incredible detail were all carved out. Some you can see hasn't finished yet. Others have been destroyed deliberately. Others are still intact. 2,300 years old, but still they are just as fresh and sort of clear as ever because they're all rock carvings. So the Ajanta Elloras are, of course, not related with the Buddha, but inspired by the Buddha, and then devotees build the temples. Like people build temples these days, different parts of the world, out of gyp rocks and big brick veneers and concrete. In Indians, they never used any building material because the mountain itself became the building. They just carved out the whole temple, the doors, the pillars, even the chairs, let alone the statues and all the things before the statues, all carved out of that very cave. So that's an incredible, and that's not the only cave temple, Ajahn Ellora. Then there are many more caves near Mumbai. Mumbai in the old days, we never know they were Buddhist, but there was huge Buddhist caves, just a place called Kalhari, which is not far from Mumbai. So there are a lot more Buddhist caves and Buddhist temples and ruins are nowadays being excavated, even in Andhra Pradesh and South India. There are many such. These are the main Buddhist sites of the life of the Buddha associated all in northern India. But Buddhism spread all over India, and including the south. And the proof of that is all those rock carvings. Locals are not Buddhist. It's only in 1930s, 40s, the Indian Dr. Ambedkar, the author of the Indian Constitution, he became Buddhist and millions followed him and then renounced their caste system orientated Hinduism and become a new Buddhist in India. But India has a very small percentage of Buddhists these days. But all the rock carvings and temples and pillars from last 2 millenniums have not been erasable. That's the problem. That's the kind of a proof of the pilgrims create those places and has therefore made sure that this history of India is not forgotten as a Buddhist kingdom in those days. So in this way, going on pilgrimage has a significant for the people like us who go there. Like I have gone about at least like 16 times now. I've been going every alternative year, except since COVID we couldn't do. And each of them we go, and the places are all amazing transformation each year because of the locals have all responded to the huge pilgrims that come from all over the world. These days it's not just the locals, Buddhists, but all over the world, like people from different parts of the world are also visiting out of religious devotion, not just as a tourist. But of course the hotels and all the facilities, they are now geared for tourism. If the people are simple pilgrims, they go and stay in the temple guest rooms, temples. Temple guest rooms are very, very basic and almost below basic, some of them facilities. Hundreds of people will sleep on the floor, for instance. They will bring their bedding. And so lots of Buddhist pilgrims are doing that, like Burmese, Thai, Sri Lankan. They were never, but high upper middle class Burmese or Thai would go as a tourist. They would actually stay in good, comfortable hotels. And you can see some of the big 5-star hotels are all filled with all these Thai people, You wouldn't believe, you hardly get a spare spot to sit because it's completely inundated by Thai people. You would be the only one, two, three of you sitting on the corner, hardly find a place. So during those 3 months, these days, upper middle class Buddhists are now traveling as a tourist, not longer as ordinary pilgrims who rough up, who, who don't mind rough up, and not because they want to rough up, because they can't afford. And most of those Asian country people's income is so low, and they could never afford those, 100 US dollar, 150 US dollar hotels a night. They can't afford doing that. Of course, they'll sleep in the local temple's floor and give a donation to the monk and cook their own food. So that's the kind of arrangement that traditional pilgrims do. And Tibetans don't even do that. They will bring their own tent. They will bring their own kerosene stove, and they'll pitch the tent wherever they think they can without any permission. Nowadays they're told they can't pitch the tent there, so they have to pay something for the pitching the tent, and they will wee everywhere. nowadays things are changing. But in some places you just have to relieve yourself somewhere, wherever you can, because there's no toilet anywhere. If you go to the toilet, it's painfully stinking that you can't even go inside the room. It stings your nose and all your face. You don't want to comfort the lower one. Or the upper orifices become suffering to relieve the suffering in the lower orifice. So we have pilgrims who don't hesitate going in the bush and relieve themselves. At the first few days, they say, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. So it's quite an amazing culture shock with regard to what people need, So the most Westerners, definitely, without a toilet and a shower that works, they can't really go on anywhere like that, because that's what we are so used to, comfort and basic convenience. But some places in India, they still, people are like that. It's good to be able to walk in such toilets. Very good. You really know that there is a nose. Buddha said in Heart Sutra, there is no nose, but you realize you have nose, But in India, you realize you have sense doors, because, because you can actually smell, you can actually taste things. In India, you have an amazing realization of the taste and the sound, and people will approach to you and ask weird questions. Why weird personal questions? You will think it's insult in the West. Who the hell you are? They will come to you and say, "Are you married?" Are you single? And they just ask all of these things. So there are lots of cultural things like that you need to be wary of. Anyway, going on pilgrimage is very meaningful, and of course, not many people dare to go to India on their own. Yeah, India is a bit difficult to go on your own. You will definitely, some people, even in a group, wanted to come back after the first day. in the early 80s, when it took, because things weren't real basic and sometimes very difficult to get everything organized, and people want to go back home next day because they can't stand the crowd and all the things. But things have changed a lot. Now upper middle class Indians are increased. Indian trains and buses and planes have become a lot more modernized, and the change in the last few years is incredible. So anyway, so the India has become much more convenient to travel or go on pilgrimage. Going on a pilgrimage is very useful because when you go to those places, make prayers, make offerings, and visit those places, it says it purifies lots of your negative karma and the defilements if you do so with such fervent wish, prayer, and belief, and conduct yourself accordingly. So therefore, going on a pilgrimage is a retreat while traveling. So it's very, very useful thing to do. As you know, we are doing the pilgrimage this December, so numbers are fairly coming up, and it's going to be closed. The registration will be soon closed at the end of this month. So if you know anyone who wish to go or accompany, please let them know. And all the details of the pilgrimage, most of the details are accurate, but itinerary is still a little bit uncertain because of number of factors. But it will be finalized over the next 3-4 weeks. But the starting date and ending date has not changed, and everything is so. Those of you who are already are registered to go, of course, we know who they are, and you will receive necessary information if they changes. But others who are interested to join, the details are on our website. Thank you very much, everyone. So with this, we'll conclude here. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you.
And thank you for reminiscing over the pilgrimage. I recommend it to everyone. It's a memorable experience. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Rinpoche.